And we're live. This is Deep Thirds Podcast. I am Vince Mercandetti, filling in for both Randy Hammond and Carl Arneth, and I'm alongside the only one who managed to make it, Matt Bushnell. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm great, Vince. How are you doing this evening?
Doing well, man. I'm trying to fill the four shoes today. Randy is at the world's happiest place, Disney World, although he couldn't possibly be happier than me today. And he will be dodging strollers all day. Does not have any kids. That should be fun for him. Probably, I would think, has the alcohol at this point. Carl is like Steve Sachs in Simpsons softball episode. He's in some alternate universe right now. So here I am joining you. And we had an interesting weekend of football.
To say the least, it was impactful, surprising, and one man may be losing a member of his body.
Yeah, we will get to that. That's going to be my favorite topic of the entire night. So let's jump right into it. We'll go with the AFC first because neither of us have a horse in that race, depending on the race. And we'll start with the Titans-Ravens. So Titans, of course, shocked the world again, maybe this time to a much bigger degree. They beat the Ravens and the second least clutch Harbaugh. What do you have on that game? I mean, what happened there? 28-12 wasn't particularly close. Ravens never really got it going. Take me through that.
I think we're going to hear, and a lot of people are going to say rhythm. You know, as an offense, you always try to find your rhythm. And what breaks up rhythm? Drop passes, penalties, turnovers, and it really keeps you off schedule. So I think what really hurt the Ravens was early on you saw a couple of big drops. Then you saw that interception off the tipped hands of the tight end. It was a bad throw. Jackson was off a little bit. But when your quarterback's not having a good day throwing the football accuracy-wise, you really have to make those catches. If it hits your hands, you got to catch it. And just staying off schedule. And then Vrabel's defense, and I kind of pointed it to against the Patriots last week, how he can scheme. He goes from scheming against a quarterback that's trying to dink and dunk and spread out the field and try to create mismatches within the middle to a team that is going to stress you defensively by read options and a lot of quick passes and really, by a tight end game. And it was just really impressive to see Vrabel be able to contain Lamar Jackson a little bit. He still had over 100 rushing yards and over 300 passing yards. And to really give you a stat and how amazing this was for a performance by Lamar Jackson, I know a lot of people are going to say, he lost the game. I'm not buying it was Lamar Jackson. I think it was a combination of a team effort. Lamar Jackson became the first player in NFL history, regular season and postseason, to have 50 pass attempts and 20 rush attempts in the same game.
That's pretty crazy. I mean, I agree with you to a large extent. That game was not on Lamar. It was kind of systematic across the board. Ravens didn't take care of the football. Ravens couldn't run the football. Ravens couldn't pass. They had 300 yards, but 50 attempts, it's not saying much. Titans really just dominated from start to finish, and big credit to their game plan. I mean, their game plan is one that we'll touch on later historically, but this year it's working. Henry can't seem to be stopped yet. And Tannehill, the one thing that's been a constant for him is he takes care of the football. And, he has not turned it over like he used to in Miami or like most quarterbacks do. And he's not costing the team. It's like the definition of game manager to me.
Yeah, I think the thing that bothers me when it comes to Ryan Tannehill is that people want to anoint him like he's doing a great job. Yes, I mean, he's taking care of the football. It's a really solid game plan by the Tennessee Titans, but they're not throwing the football down the field. They're not putting the game in his hands. They're relying on Derrick Henry, and that offensive line is something to behold. I mean, we talk about it quite a bit, but that offensive line it's ground and pound. We're going to shove the rock down your throat and stop us if you can. And Ryan Tannehill makes some key throws to move the ball to get first downs, but you saw Derrick Henry with a touchdown pass. I mean, you get to the goal line, great play, but I mean, to me, that tells me that they don't trust their quarterback to make plays in the red zone when Derrick Henry had that jump touchdown pass. So
It is a weird place for it. I don't think it was necessary. I agree. Very cool play. I can tell you that my wife got super excited watching. Like that's the stuff that a casual football fan's gonna get super excited about. And Mike Vrabel is pulling out all the stops. He's making all the right calls. We saw the Belichick. He out Belichick in the Patriots game with the whole clock management manipulation. He's pulling out trick plays with Henry this week. They're not making Tannehill do much. So, I agree in the sense he really hasn't carried them either game. He's had like 200 yards combined in the two games. Yep. He makes a throw here and there, but that's all he's had to do. So the game plan's been brilliant. I don't think the Ravens had a bad game plan. Like the approach was fine, but they got in a hole so quickly. There wasn't, they didn't have much of a chance to get anything going, and then they're not really a comeback team, and they haven't had to come back in 3 months. So definitely not a spot they're used to either.
Yeah, and to throw another couple of numbers at you here, Derrick Henry became the first back, and I want to say close to 25 years, that has had 3 straight games with over 180 rushing yards. Week 17 against the Texans, first playoff game against the Patriots, and then this playoff game against the Ravens. So a lot of people are saying, you can't stop Henry. They're right. You can't stop Henry. He's carrying the Tennessee Titans all the way to the AFC Championship game. And Ryan Tannehill is the first quarterback since, I believe, 1974 for his team to win 2 playoff games and for him not to throw for 100 yards.
Wow.
So it just a lot of interesting numbers.
Yeah. So Titans moving on, AFC Championship. Now they don't have any Super Bowl victories. They have been to the Super Bowl before. It's been about 20 years, a little bit longer. They're moving on and they're playing the Chiefs, who beat the Texans, which was probably my favorite win of the weekend. Because I got it right, which at that point in time, I was 1-4 in playoff picks. Wow. In the playoffs. But Chiefs down 24-0 to Houston, who we know is the most cheating city in the entire country. They don't deserve anything nice. They didn't get anything nice because after that 24-point lead in about 5 seconds, Pat Mahomes went all Pat Mahomes, and they go on a historic beatdown mode for the rest of the game, win that game 51-31. I mean, what changed? You've played football, at a higher level. What's the mentality when it's 24-0? How do you go on a 51-7 run against a team who's just kicking your ass for that long?
The worst thing you could do is start looking at the scoreboard. At that point, it doesn't matter. It's literally the one play at a time mantra. You just want to concentrate on getting positive yards, and you want to string together a couple of first downs. And then you want to get a touchdown eventually. At that point, you can't settle for field goals. Field goals are not an option at that point. It's 4 down territory once you pass the 50-yard line. And what they did was so impressive. I mean, I know we were kind of talking back and forth amongst the group on our Football Life page. Once they scored that first touchdown, you kind of felt that momentum shift. It was 24. Well, actually, I take that back. When it was 21-0 and they held them to that field goal, that was the beginning.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Did you agree? I was so annoyed. That's such a Bill O'Brien thing to do. Did you agree with not going for it on 4th and 1, settling for the points? Because that's a moral victory, right, for the Chiefs?
Yeah, it's a huge moral victory. You haven't stopped them all game. You're letting them march down the field, time after time, scoring touchdowns. And as soon as you let them stop you, the momentum kind of eked back. So that was a moral victory. It's like, oh, wait, we're not out of this game yet. And you have Patrick Mahomes, so you can come back in this game. And I thought it was indefensible. You go for the kill shot. You put them out of their misery. You end it. You go up 28-0, and then you start putting that doubt. 24-0 and 28-0. 4 touchdowns are different than that 4th and 1 field goal, 24-0, and it changed everything. And then you saw them string together the first downs. Well, actually, I don't think they got a first down. I think they ran 3 plays and got a touchdown.
That's just rapid fire. I think at one point it was 7 plays, 3 touchdowns for the Chiefs offense, those first 3 touchdown drives, which is just like you could almost do that without having a defense on the field because maybe someone would drop it just with a wide open pass. It's like there was no defense whatsoever. It was amazing.
It's so incredible. And I'll talk about their weapons here in a second, but I want to pinpoint the avalanche happened on that 4th and 4 fake punt. It was incredibly stupid. At that point, you already played conservative going for 4th and 1 field goal. You said, you know what, we're going to play conservative. We're going to kick the field goal. We're not trying to, think that we have the game in hand. So you do that 4th and 1. What the crap happens at that point? You go for a 4th and 4 inside your own 35. So you want to give Patrick Mahomes only a 35-yard field to work with, and you don't think he's going to score a touchdown? You already put them in field goal range. That was one of the dumbest calls I have ever seen in my entire life. I mean, I've played for dumb coaches. I've played for really smart coaches. I've watched a lot of football in my day. I played against a lot of opponents, but that is by far probably one of the dumbest calls I have ever seen.
I've never seen a head coach panic up 24-0 or up 24-7, whatever. That was Bill O'Brien, and he panicked. He psyched himself out and goes for it. I mean, we think about way back when Bill Belichick, Peyton Manning's just eviscerating the Patriots, and the Patriots had that huge lead in that AFC Championship. Think about the scrutiny we gave Belichick, and it was rightfully so, going for it on 4th and 2 at his own 26 or whatever it was. And that was like, you can reason with it in that the route was already, like, the comeback was already on for the and you're talking about Peyton Manning, top 1, 2, top 5 quarterback ever. But this is, you're up by 17 points in the first half and you're going for it. It made no sense. There's I've yet to run into anyone who can justify it.
The only way you could justify it is if he punted that ball, because at that point you already said, well, I don't trust my offense to get 1 yard. And then you go for it on 4th and 4, and it's like, okay, so you don't trust your offense to get a yard, but you trust your special teams to get 4 yards. Like, it was one of the most indefensible, stupid calls. So then, the avalanche started, and Sorensen made a fantastic play as a defender. I love open field tackles. Nothing tells me more about a defender than a guy who can make an open field tackle. It is by far one of the hardest things to do in all of football.
I haven't seen it in 8 years, so I agree with you.
Well, I haven't seen a professional offense in 8 years in Chicago, so
maybe we can combine rosters and win a wild card together.
That's the ultimate dream.
Yeah. Good. Well, yeah. So moving on then. Now, the NFC. This had to be an interesting weekend for you in particular. We'll get to the reason why the Niners game was interesting, but also on the other end, you had the Packers playing. You're a Bears fan, but let's start with the Vikings-Niners game. And a quick shout out to my man Chris Condor. I'm actually wearing pretty much half of his Secret Santa gifts to me. Giants hat, UCF. Yep, my second favorite college football team, but because Jim Harbaugh coaches my first one, I've adopted them as my favorite right now. And so we're in the Secret Santa gear. He's a Niners fan. That's why I bring it up. I stalked his Facebook to find this out. We've got a lot of Niners fans actually in the group. Now, Vikings, of course, upset the world last week. They knocked off the Saints, put Drew Brees halfway into retirement. This week, the first half I thought was pretty close. It's what I was expecting. Bruising defensive battles, like 14-10 at halftime. And then the second half, Kirk Cousins just it wasn't totally his fault, but he was way more like the Kirk Cousins we're used to in the second half. And the Niners pull away. They end up with a pretty comfortable 27-10 win. Tale of two halves. What happened there?
I think you saw the offensive line just wear down for the Vikings. That Saints game was pretty hard on them, exerted a lot of energy. And then you go against the best defensive line in football by a mile. I mean, they're able to bring pressure from all points, and they were able to bring 4 most time. And then, D Ford, Nick Bosa, DeForest Buckner, those guys are 3 all-pros. And then you have an all-pro cornerback in Richard Sherman, and Kirk Cousins started hearing footsteps. He felt the pressure, and it wasn't really there all the time. San Francisco took away everything short. Where Cousins made his money really against the Saints was throwing the deep ball, and he felt like he didn't have enough time to throw the deep ball, and it cost him. I mean, we saw Diggs with that incredible catch on that touchdown. and they just never really tried to really stretch that defense. They really didn't test, I believe, Mosley when Weatherspoon got pulled, because Weatherspoon was awful for the most part of that game. And then Mosley came in and really kind of shut it down. I'm really surprised that they just let that, never really tested it. And Sherman's 100 years old? Try him deep, don't throw the underneath stuff to him because he's too smart for that.
Yeah.
And they'll play a lot of zone, but the defensively, San Francisco's really solid. Offensively, I was expecting 2 Jimmy Garoppolo picks. I still don't believe in Garoppolo. That's still my biggest question by far on that team.
But I think that's totally fair. I think my biggest pet peeve watching playoff football is when a team doesn't exploit the other team's one weakness, because usually it's one at this time of year. No one forced Ryan Tannehill to beat them in the Ravens-Titans game. No one forced Jimmy G to make a huge play in that Niners game. And now they're both sitting home because of it. And, and it's very simplified. I get it. Obviously the Niners did a lot of things well to keep that from having to happen. Yep. But that is so frustrating to watch when you're like, this is all you have to do. Like, just make Jimmy G beat you. Because I agree with you. I've said all year, he is a turnover machine compared to the other quarterbacks who are kind of at this point. And that's the Achilles heel for the Niners. Like, there should be a spot where he's going to make a big turnover. He's going to throw an interception or, whatever the case may be, lack pocket presence. And it's going to be a huge deal. But the Niners defense has been so good. And Kittle and Deebo Samuels and all these other guys I hadn't heard of until this year have been so good. It just hasn't been a factor. And when you're only giving up 10 points a game, that covers a lot of mistakes.
Well, don't underplay the importance of Emmanuel Sanders. That trade changed everything for the 49ers this year. It gave Jimmy Garoppolo a very reliable target to pair with Kittle. And the thing is, it's really hard to stop their run game when you have to devote help. I mean, you have to double team Kittle almost every play. If you don't double team Kittle, he's going to kill you all game long. And that gives Jimmy G a lot of extremely easy throws. Emmanuel Sanders beats you underneath. He can run those seam routes with the best of them. He almost always beats his guys off the line. So jamming him is pretty hard at the line of scrimmage. I have to give Deebo Samuel a little bit of credit. I'm not in love with him. As a third option, he makes a lot of sense. But it opens up that run game. And Minnesota couldn't stop the run at all. San Francisco shoved the ball down their throat. And credit to the game plan. Kyle Shanahan does this. He would have a Super Bowl ring if he decided to do it in the Super Bowl. And that's, run the football. Just shove it down their throats.
Yeah, fair enough. And speaking of shoving it down their throats, that last game, Packers Seahawks, this was shoving 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks down their throats, Russell Wilson versus Aaron Rodgers. And Rodgers had this one from the jump. I mean, we knew the Seahawks were banged up. We knew that it was going to be a tall task going into Lambeau in the freezing temperatures and getting anything going. But, the Packers, a little Mike McCarthy flashbacks going on at one point. They're up 28-10. Seahawks cut it to 28-23 and then just didn't have that knockout punch ready. Packers move on. They win at Lambeau. They're headed to the AFC Championship. What are your thoughts there?
I find there's 4 things I took away from this game. One was the opposite of the Texans and Chiefs game. At the end of the game, when Carroll decided to punt, I was like, man, you lost this game. You can't give the ball back to Rodgers. Nope. Because he's going to beat you. And I kind of sensed that they were going to get a first down, and the rest is history. Then Aaron Jones had about the impact I expected them to have. I mean, I was completely impressed with how they decided to use Aaron Jones and then Devontae Adams, big bodied wide receiver, and you're letting him go one-on-one with a secondary. That's okay. It's not great. And then offensively, Seattle couldn't find an answer for the Smith brothers. I mean, all game, Wilson's feeling pressure. And I'll be honest with you, Vince, I was shocked to see Russell Wilson, who I think has one of the most probably the most awareness in the pocket out of all the quarterbacks are in today's NFL. He always feels that pressure. He's always able to escape. But when they brought that corner on that 2-point conversion off the corner, just scorching down, and Wilson never felt it.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of that 2-point conversion, I had two big problems with Pete Carroll in that fourth quarter. That was one of them. I get the math behind it. I understand, they're on a roll. They're trying to cut it to a 3-point game. 3 points is better than 4. I get all that. I just, with 9:33 left in the game, both teams are going to get the football again. It's like a 95% chance of that happening. I didn't like that the Seahawks voluntarily even made the risk of leaving a point on the board. And that's exactly what they did, because they didn't convert the 2-point conversion. And then it would have forced another 2-point conversion if they did get a touchdown, which either way, which they would have had to get, whether it was a 4-point or a 5-point deficit. I just thought the risk to make it a 3-point game at that point in time, assuming the Packers weren't going to score again, where the 3 points were relevant to begin with, and then obviously the Seahawks were going to get the ball back. They could have gotten a touchdown either way. I didn't like that call. And then I completely agree with you on the punt. I mean, if you're going to make that call with 9:33 left, why are you then punting with like 2:50 left or however much was like that? The combination of those two plays made no sense to me. And then of course Aaron Rodgers does what Aaron Rodgers does. He runs out. It was Jones obviously, but they run out the clock. Rodgers makes those two big third down conversions. So completely agree. I wasn't hot on Pete Carroll's decision making in that fourth quarter, and he's overall a pretty good coach, obviously.
Yep. Yeah, definitely is.
Good. So moving on, and you mentioned impact earlier, and this is a very interesting postseason, namely because the Patriots were eliminated so early. It kind of like has that wide, and then the Saints go down in the first round as well, has that wide open feeling. And my first takeaway at this point in time, knowing the 4 teams that are left, was to look back on week 17 and remember what happened to get us to this point, because week 17 for a lot of people, like fantasy usually ends week 16. You're not paying attention to it from a fantasy standpoint. Teams are making decisions. A lot of teams are knocked out by then. It's usually an irrelevant week. But this year, the following has happened. I'm curious as to your thoughts on this. So the Ravens and Texans both benched their starters week 17. Ravens won their game. Texans did not. The Ravens were then, though, eliminated in the divisional round after having 3 weeks off because they benched their starters and had a bye week. They looked rusty pretty much the entire game. We know that starters, I don't know if it's 1 seeds or bye weeks in general, are now 9 and 6 when they bench their starters, which when you're considering it's a bye week team with an off week, that's pretty bad. Pats lost to the Dolphins week 17, which moved them from a bye week 2 seed into the 3 seed playing wild card weekend. They, of course, lose to the Titans in that matchup, even though they're at home. And speaking of the Titans, they get a win against the Texans bench because the Texans bench their starters week 17. Titans get into the playoffs, coupled with the Steelers losing their final 2 weeks, including to the Jets and the Ravens backups. So the Titans get into the playoffs. Now they've gone on this run. They eliminated the Patriots. They go further than the Texans. And then you've got the Niners, who beat the Seahawks by literally 1 foot in week 17 in that Monday, in that tremendous finish to the regular season. That gives the Niners the top seed, gives the Seahawks a 5 seed. They then have to go on the road to Philly, and then it makes them end up at Lambeau, where they lose. So just like crazy impact week 17. Do you feel like that's the norm, or was this like a particularly daunting week 17 this year?
I think it was pretty daunting, because usually you know who is going to have the positions locked up. I mean, we knew Baltimore had the 1 seed locked up. That was, that was done with. Surprised at Houston benching their starters, and even Baltimore. You got the week off. Why bench these guys, especially for a rhythm offense? And that's what we talked about earlier, is staying on schedule, rhythm, especially when you get the week off. When you're playing hot football, you don't want to stop playing. It's like a hitter in baseball. When you're on a hot streak, you don't want the day off. You want to hit the next day.
Aaron Boone special, yeah.
Yeah. And with football, it's the same thing with a quarterback. If you're hot as a quarterback, you want to keep on going. Like, all right, I'm ready to play. I want to keep on playing. I want to keep on playing. As a defense, when you're hot, you want to keep on playing. I don't think – I'll say this about Seattle. They play to the competition way too many times, and I have yet to see them play a full 4 quarters this year. It was one of the most maddening last half of the seasons I've watched from a football team. San Francisco, they should beat them easily the last game of the season. They just keep those furious rallies coming late in the game. They played down to Philadelphia. They should have smoked Philadelphia. They had no business being in that game.
Against their backup, too.
Yeah. Yep. And then they go to Green Bay. You could argue who was the better team. I think the Packers probably have better players overall. So was Seattle really that good? I think if Seattle ends up winning that game, and correct me if I'm wrong, Seattle ends up being the 2 seed. They get that bye, and then they would have ended up with San Francisco. Because I'm assuming.
I think the Saints would have been the 1. And
okay.
The 2 and the Packers the 3, maybe.
Okay, that makes sense.
Something like that. I'm pretty sure that you're right. I think the Seahawks would have been the 2 had they won.
Yeah, I think they would have, but I might be wrong on that. They might have been the 3. The Packers may have been the 2 seed, because I think the Packers were 13-3.
Okay, yeah. So, Packers, Saints, and Seahawks I know would have been top 3, obviously, since the Eagles were 9-7.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember the order.
Yeah, I just don't think Seattle was good enough to win 3 playoff games to win a Super Bowl, let alone 4. That's why I picked Green Bay. You can't go to Green Bay and not play for a half. I mean, I was astounded that you're down 21-3, and Russell Wilson had 12 pass attempts going into halftime. They really didn't have a running game. They just running Marshawn Lynch felt like you're hitting your head against a brick wall. So I think Seattle was overrated. A lot of us hoped that they would face the 49ers, but I think we'll get the better matchup with Green Bay and San Francisco.
I agree. I've been on that Green Bay bandwagon, if you will. I'm not necessarily rooting for them, but I feel like they have been underrated ever since they got blown out by the Niners. Like it was like that one game when everyone was like, all right, Packers are not for real. But you look at the rest of their season and you look at the peripherals, if you will, and they're a pretty strong team. I think they deserve to be where they are. Whether they beat the Niners, we'll get to that later. But I absolutely think that they've been an elite team in the NFC this year, and I feel like they haven't really garnered that respect all season.
Yeah, the big thing to me to take away is Baltimore should not have rested Lamar Jackson. He's 23 years old. There's no reason to rest your quarterback when he's that young. Just stop running him so much, just get him in the rhythm and passing, try some things that will protect him. Don't put him in danger. And then I think you want to keep the Houston team. That's one of the most fraudulent teams. I think we talk about the Saints. Houston, yeah, they could probably win wild card weekend every year with Deshaun Watson, but man, they play better teams. Deshaun Watson can only do so much. And Tennessee went full go. I think when you have that mentality, when your back's against the wall and you have to win, it changes your momentum. And I think we talk about that. Not too much, but sometimes a little bit where, momentum's usually only good for that game. And then, you go to the next game, it kind of starts fresh. But I think Tennessee, it really vaulted them into this AFC championship, much like, and I'm not comparing them to the 2000 Ravens because they're not the 2000 Ravens, but I think that 2000 Ravens team reeled off like 14 straight wins en route to the Super Bowl, so I think it matters. But for me as a coach, I would never rest my starters. It's football. We play every down, every game, and I don't want to send that message to my team.
That's actually a great example to use for momentum, because the Giants had beaten the Chris Carter or the Chris Carter Vikings 41-0 the game before they get the off week, and then they're in the Super Bowl against the Ravens. They lose by 100. So yeah, I mean that's a perfect example. I completely agree. I think that momentum in football is a little bit overrated after that game in general. There's so few, unless a quarterback's actively battling a known injury, I would never bench my starters week 17. I just wouldn't.
Agreed.
The probability of a key player getting hurt against probably a team who's not playing for anything, and if they are, still, the probability of them getting hurt in that moment, in those 60 minutes, is so slim compared to the benefits of staying cohesive and everyone doing their job for another week, especially when you have the next week to rest up anyway. It never made sense. And Tony Dungy and Peyton Manning, I mean, how many times did we have to see that out before we learned that lesson? And Peyton Manning, same thing, a rhythmic type guy. His system has to have its reps, if you will, not rhythmic like Lamar Jackson, who a lot of RPO action, a lot of, scrambling around, but they both kind of are cut from the same cloth to me in that those are guys who thrive on playing every week, and you take that away from them and they just come out cold every time. And now we've seen it so many times and they still do it, but what are you going to do? One guy who didn't do it, by the way, and lost the Super Bowl anyway, was Bill Belichick, the undefeated year. They played their starters against the Giants week 17. They beat the Giants week 17. And then they lose to the Giants in the Super Bowl that year. And the reason I bring it up is that the Patriots, and I'm wondering if you think this is a trend because of all of their accolades over the last 20 years, or if it's just a fluke. The Patriots have had their own kind of impact on this postseason that's pretty crazy to note. So even when being eliminated the first game, wild card weekend, they have Tannehill left Miami last year. He beats the Patriots in Foxborough, right? So there's a little AFC East action so far. Miami is the team who beats the Patriots week 17 under head coach Brian Flores, who left the Patriots the year before. And then that forces a matchup with Mike Vrabel, former Patriots dynasty player. He's head coach of the Titans. They are now an hour away from the Super Bowl, which is, of course, held in Miami, just to bring that all together. And they're playing the Chiefs, who beat the Texans, led by head coach Bill O'Brien, who's under the Belichick coaching tree. So no matter where you look in that AFC, there's Belichick impact somewhere. Are we just going to see that? Because, they've had so many guys who are great players who are obviously going to become coaches. They've had so many coordinators who get hired to be coaches because Belichick's so successful. Well, is that random, or is that something we're going to see for a while?
I think it's definitely something you'll see for a while. I mean, Mike Vrabel's the goods. We talked about that. And what you see with the Patriot system is a lot of intelligence. You play smart. You don't play stupid. You don't see the Patriot players. I mean, maybe out of the last 5 years I've watched the Patriots, I've seen maybe one or two personal falls after the play. You don't see that stuff. They're disciplined. They know the details. I mean, the devil are in the details for a lot of these things. So I think Belichick does a good job of stressing that to his team, his players, his assistant coaches. And I think they interview well because of that. So they're going to get chances. I'm sure they interview fantastic. And the players are smart. So while I do think you're going to see Belichick's imprints not only on the AFC but also the NFC. I mean, we're seeing Matt Patricia, and with the Lions, you see Joe Judge with the Giants now, of your favorite team, and I had some strong words for that.
Yeah. Well, by the way, so Joe Judge said for the last, I think, 8 years, the Patriots have been tackling in practice, and I guess the Giants haven't, which kind of that blows my mind because the Giants just suck at tackling.
Well, tackling is one of those things you have to do. I mean, you can tell when a team doesn't tackle because they miss tackles. It's a matter of the hitting point. And I don't want to get too in depth with, the fundamentals of tackling, but the one thing you look for a bad tackling team is where's their head. Always look for where the defender's head's going to be at when they make impact. If they're looking down on the ground, guaranteed they just don't really stress tackling. You want to keep your head up. You want to drive through your target. And a lot of teams, with the lack of tackling in practice and the new CBA, and these guys have to preserve their bodies. And like Marshawn Lynch said, you got to protect your chicken. So, you want to make sure that, you're protecting yourself. But one of the big things, if you don't tackle right, you're going to get hurt. Right. So it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? So you want to make sure that you have a well-balanced, you're tackling, but you're not hurting each other in practice. I mean, it's a lot, but I'd rather my team be physical. That's why I love Vrabel and the Titans. I think Belichick stresses, contact, because you have to get used to it. You just can't have guys playing two-hand touch, because then you see guys trying to grab it. And interesting bit from this past weekend's games, when Earl Thomas said last week, oh, Patriots didn't look too interested in tackling Derrick Henry. And then you see Derrick Henry stiff arm him, and then he's pushing him on the back to lead his blocking convey. So, I mean, it was something else that game. But tackling's an art, man. It takes a lot of skill to be a good open field tackle. I'm looking at you, Sorensen.
That was one of my favorite moments of the weekend, by the way. He literally turned Earl Thomas around and threw him into a player like that. You can't make that up. One team who did not have a New England impact, obviously, are the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. So, but does he have ties to the Falcons? And the reason I bring that up, Lamar Jackson obviously is going to draw comparisons to Michael Vick. He is the best running quarterback we've seen since Michael Vick, and maybe he is better than Michael Vick. But so far, 0-2 in the playoffs, hasn't particularly looked great in either game. Is that something that we're going to see for his career because of just the nature of how he plays the quarterback position, or is it too early to tell and it's just, he lost 2 games, he's only in his second year?
Michael Vick didn't have the benefit of playing in today's NFL, where a lot of the spread concepts are being embraced. For a lot of Vick's career, they tried to make him a pocket passer. Like, great, we know you can run, we know you're super fast, but we need to contain you in here. Dan Reeves was his coach at the beginning of his career. And Dan Reeves, also of John Elway fame, didn't utilize John Elway's legs as much as he could have. I mean, there's so many quarterbacks in the history of the NFL that had fantastic legs. If they could play in this era, it would be something special to watch. And I think with Lamar Jackson, I think you're going to see him be more successful for the simple fact that he's going to be allowed to do these things. The Vic comparisons, I think they're accurate, but also unfair, because it is his second year. We don't know what he's going to be. Vic, I mean, his arm strength was unparalleled coming out of the draft. I mean, I think that's one thing people forget about Vic. Vic could throw a football through a brick wall.
You could chuck it, yeah.
Yeah, I don't see that arm strength from Jackson, at least not the touch. I mean, Vic, he had some accuracy issues, but he could touch it or put some touch on it and put it in spots where only his guys could catch it. But just the embrace of, we have this dual threat running back wasn't embraced. So I think Jackson ultimately will be more successful than Vic, but if Vic got to play in today's NFL, it would be something special to watch.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think having John Harbaugh is going to really help too. I make fun of the Harbaughs a lot because I'm a Michigan fan, but they are really, they're good coaches. And John in particular, with the system that he's able to create and whatnot. I mean, he completely tailored that franchise around Lamar Jackson. So just the fact he was willing to do that as a Giants fan, I can tell you with McAdoo and Shermer, that never would have happened. They are very much the round hole square piece mentality fit their system, as opposed to let's tailor it around the talent we've got. And John Harbaugh so far has gotten the most out of him.
So let me ask you this. What is your best case scenario for your quarterback, Daniel Jones? Do you want him to be like Lamar Jackson? Or are you looking more like maybe, who am I looking for? Another semi-mobile quarterback. I don't want to compare him to Aaron Rodgers because that's not fair, and Mahomes because that's not fair. But are you looking for a more balanced running, but more or less pocket passer out of Jones?
Yeah. Can I call him a rich man's Ryan Tannehill? Like that. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Is I think it's key, especially in today's NFL, that you can escape the pocket and scramble and maybe extend a drive because you got a first down, or design a play on third down, that uses the quarterback, or whatever the case may be. I think those are all key. I don't think Daniel Jones is not a scrambling quarterback. He's very smart. He's way more accurate than anyone gave him credit for before the draft. The arm strength, I think, is a legitimate criticism. I don't foresee him throwing 50 yards deep very often, but he has the tools to be successful. He's got to work on the fumbling. That's something I don't even take seriously as a rookie. I mean, he's got years to clean that up. Like, to tell me that Daniel Jones is going to be a failure because he fumbles a lot is the most ridiculous thing to me, because that's such a correctable thing. And we know that the Giants have had shitty coaches until now, hopefully. So, yeah, I mean, I think he is pass first. but with the ability to kind of create some plays. And that's really what I think ideally I would look for in a quarterback in the modern NFL. So we'll see. He's got to execute. He's got to continue to develop. A lot of times year 2 quarterbacks take a step back. Things aren't always linear. So we'll see how he does. But I think by year 3, just like I'd say with Trubisky, just like I'd say with Darnold, just like I'd say with anyone, you got to prove you're a franchise guy, or else you put your team in a real rough spot in that 4th year.
Yeah, well, that's where we're at right now as Bear fans. I think the thing that was encouraging with Trubisky last year, 2018 season, was the fact that he felt that pocket. Like, he had an innate ability to feel the pressure coming, and he stepped up in the pocket a lot. That's really what makes a quarterback make that elite jump, is the pocket presence and understanding where the rush is coming from and understanding where the coverage is dropping off to. And this year, Trubisky, I mean, it was rock bottom. I mean, I didn't expect it. I wouldn't have been surprised if he said his numbers decreased a little bit. He wasn't going to be as good, but I mean, it just went ass backwards, and he was completely awful. He didn't understand where the pressure was coming from. He didn't want to run. That was mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
So this year.
Yeah, I mean, well, now it's do or die for everyone. Quarterback, GM, coach, like everyone's do or die now.
Has to be.
Yeah, but I agree with you. Trubisky did a lot of things well last year. I know easy schedule. You can say what you want about whatever for the Bears. Didn't win a playoff game. I get all that. But I thought last year that was a guy who can make throws, but use his legs. And maybe he was a little more legs than throws, but he stopped using his legs and he can't make throws. So, there's a hard regression. We'll see.
Bad combination.
Yeah, so, we'll see. And speaking of guys who haven't taken the next step, so everyone's been talking about the quarterbacks, right? Ryan Tannehill knocking out Tom Brady, Drew Brees and Brady not winning a playoff game this year. I've looked at it more as the coaches. The coaching in this postseason is so interesting to me because it kind of turns everything on its head. We touched on a little earlier, but a lot of focus on, passing the torch from Brady to Brees. Maybe it's a young quarterbacks league now. Or Brady and Brees down to younger guys. But consider this: Super Bowl winners, Doug Peterson, Pete Carroll, Sean Payton, Bill Belichick, all out. 9 Super Bowls. They've all won at least one. All of them eliminated already. And what we have left is 3 coaches who have never won a Super Bowl, never been in a Super Bowl. They're all either, first, second year coaches. And then you've got Andy Reid. And Andy Reid is the biggest cuck coach of all time. There's no debating it in my mind. He is the biggest choker as far as coaches go ever. And I'll give you the resume. I did this research earlier. This is unbelievable to me.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. So Andy Reid is 0-1 in Super Bowls. He is 1-5 in championship games, both NFC and AFC. He has 11 divisional crowns in his career, and he's 0-10 going into this season as far as winning the Super Bowl when he's won a division. With the 1 Super Bowl and 4 losses before the championship game. So 11 times has won the division, 0 times has won the Super Bowl. The 11th time, by the way, is this year, so that's pending. And 4 of those times he didn't make the championship game. So in addition to that, he has losses to the Rams, Panthers, Bucks, and Cardinals, which were all seasons where those teams either won or entered the Super Bowl for the first time ever as a franchise. In addition to that, he gave the only playoff win of Tony Romo's career to Tony Romo by losing a wild card round to the Cowboys. And now he's facing a 6 seed with a quarterback with no playoff wins until this season. So with all of that said, my question to you is, what are Andy Reid's chances against 3 head coaches with no experience, quarterbacks largely inexperienced, except for Aaron Rodgers, guys who have never coached in the Super Bowl before? Does he have a chance this year to actually win a Super Bowl?
Yes. And it's not because Andy Reid, he may have the best quarterback when it's all said and done to ever play in the NFL.
Bold. So, you're a big Elway guy. That's a big, bold statement.
There's so many things that Mahomes does that's unconventional that you would never teach in a million years. And he's so damn special. Like, I told you guys in the football life thread of the games, I'm like, man, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen when they were down 24-0. I was like, this is nuts. And then Mahomes just goes nuts. Like he's throwing from odd angles. He's putting the balls in spots where like literally only his guy can catch it. Andy Reid has done a masterful job developing this quarterback. He has nurtured him on the bench, and Alex Smith gets some credit. But yeah, I think if Andy Reid doesn't win it this year, I don't know if he ever wins one. I can't see with the AFC getting better next year. You're talking about the Texans have to get better. I mean, and they can't get much worse. They have the most talent in that NFC or AFC South division.
Yeah.
But Deshaun Watson's going to get better. Lamar Jackson's going to get better. Pittsburgh's going to be better. New England in some shape or form will be back, as much as that pains people to say.
One more year, I agree.
Yep. Miami, I see Miami making, small strides. Maybe not next year, but the year after that, I like what they do. I mean, is Cleveland going to be this bad forever? Maybe. I mean, and we'll Oakland.
Yeah. Well, the latest mock I saw was them taking Judy, which I think would actually be a pretty interesting pick for them. Give Carr his Amari Cooper back, essentially. So,
yeah, he needs that back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think obviously Andy Reid's got a chance, right? He's 2 wins away. It's interesting because the Chiefs aren't built like any of the other teams, and it'll be interesting to see if that plays out. But Pat Mahomes, I agree with you. I think Pat Mahomes, and I mentioned this, Pat Mahomes and Russell Wilson, I could watch all day long. They're the most interesting quarterbacks to me in the NFL to watch. Russell Wilson can do things like roll to his left and throw full power in the end. Like that shouldn't happen from a human being. But Pat Mahomes was so funny. His first 3 touchdowns of that game were all from like irregular angles or like dump offs. Like he threw it through defenders' arms. Like it just crazy shit that was not normal. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Pat Mahomes, if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, it's going to be because Pat Mahomes maintained the level he just played at. Put it that way. Because I think the other 3 teams have better defenses, and I think the other 3 teams have better running games. So if the Chiefs win, it's going to be Pat Mahomes.
Yeah, and the one thing I take from Andy Reid as far as a coach, he's been here before. So he knows the schedule, and that's going to be very important, especially going into Super Bowl Sunday. I mean, Kyle Shanahan will have an idea as well. Matt LaFleur is going to have no clue. So, but Mike Vrabel as a player is going to have some experience as well. So I would say the team at the biggest disadvantage coaching wise is going to be the Packers, as crazy as that sounds, when they had Mike Bland McCarthy coaching them. So, I mean, as far as coaching wise, I know we say 3 newbies, and really I look at it as 1 newbie, because I really think Vrabel has a good grasp on what his team is. And as a player, he knows how important that schedule is and consistency is. And we talk about, he wasn't going to rest up. He knew it had to go pedal to the metal. He doesn't make a lot of coaching mistakes. What hurts Andy Reid and what hurt him in the past, and what I remember him getting ripped for the most, is ultra conservative play when it mattered the most. He would do the Pete Carroll. He would punt and give the ball back to Aaron Rodgers with 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But with Patrick Mahomes is his nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. It's just like he's got Superman on steroids as his quarterback.
Yeah, covers a lot of mistakes. It's because he can score in 30 seconds. I mean, the Andy Reid is just notorious for, leading by a possession, having 1 time out there in the 4th quarter. It's just like it's clock management, and you're right. It's going conservative at the wrong time. Bill O'Brien has a lot of DNA of that in him, but has not had the success. Like, that's the thing about Andrew. He's a Hall of Famer to me.
Yep.
He just cannot win the big game. It's unbelievable. He's like the Dan Marino of coaches, I think. And really, that's not even fair to Dan Marino, because his supporting cast was just so dreadful for so much of his
career. God, yeah.
Andy Reid's had all sorts of weapons. We're about to get to that, but you did bring up Mike Vrabel, and I want to get to, obviously, my favorite segment. Now, it has been widely reported. This was brought to my attention, just so everyone knows. I didn't go seeking this. This was brought to my attention. It was reported by SP Nation, I think Bleacher Report, a few other places. Mike Vrabel earlier in the season said that he would chop off his penis in exchange for winning a Super Bowl, which is a very bold statement to make. And I'm going to, of course, take him literally at his word. He will indeed chop off his penis if he wins a Super Bowl. So my question is, assume that the Super Bowl is like the say-all end-all of your life accomplishments, right? Because, you know, like I'd easily be like, I'd rather keep my penis. I don't care about winning a Super Bowl football player. But assume this is like the greatest thing you can ever do with your life. If your life's entirely fulfilled, would you chop off your penis if it meant accomplishing that?
See, I have to ask a couple of questions going into this. One, okay. Are you going to be put under? Like, are they going to give you the gas to fall asleep?
Yeah, we'll assume this is in like the cleanest, most like painless way possible. It's just you're not going to have the function of having a penis afterwards.
Does it improve my financial situation at all?
You can assume like Super Bowl endorsements. I'm sure flashing the ring gets you some free meals in Tennessee for life. Like, you know, all of that stuff. I don't think it's not coming with like $100 million though.
Yeah, I got to keep my penis.
Yeah. Am I ever going to trust Mike Vrabel again if he keeps his penis and wins the Super Bowl? Like that's totally just, you can't do that. You can't make a statement like that and then be like, oh, that's just kidding. It was hyperbole.
I mean, what rhymes with penis? What can he say that he was misquoted on?
Yeah, I was talking about Wheatus. Jesus. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he would cut Jesus out of his life to win a Super Bowl. I think that's probably what he meant to say.
You know, some people would be okay with that. I mean, there's some people that don't, you know, believe in that sort of thing. But, you know, I would, as a player, and Mike Vrabel made that comment, if he didn't cut it off, I'd be disappointed in him.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta practice what you preach. I don't think there's any way around that. So, anyway,
let me ask you this. Hold on, before we jump.
Yeah.
You're a player on his team. Does that give you extra motivation to try to win the game?
Win the game or lose the game? Like, am I like, do I want to save Mike Vrabel's penis, or am I like trying to make sure that thing's coming off? I don't know. I guess knowing me, I would try to win like hell after that. Like, I need to be like in an embarrassing situation where you're either losing your penis or your trustworthiness, you know, your word. So, yeah. Even if I love you as a coach, all those 2-a-days or whatever, it's like, they're going to come to pasture now.
Yeah, they are.
So, final segment here, and it's previewing obviously next week. I don't think we have time to go as in-depth as we did with the recaps of divisional games, but we do have Chiefs-Titans coming up. Mike Vrabel with penis currently against Andy Reid without penis currently. What's your prediction for that score? Something to look for? You know, what are your thoughts on that?
So Tennessee, Kansas City, right? That's what we're looking at here.
Yep, in Kansas City, if it makes any difference to you.
I have to go with Kansas City. There's too many weapons. Sammy Watkins and Tyreek Hill can stretch you so deep. It leaves Travis Kelce with a huge blanket under the middle of the field to work all day. And then, you know, Hardman, who's a speedster. I don't know why they keep on playing Robinson and not Hardman. And their special teams are better. What Tennessee does well is they're going to give you like 8 possessions a game. They're going to ground and pound. You're not going to get those extra possessions. Vrabel isn't going to punt on 4th and 4 or 4th and 4 and call a fake punt. He's going to trust his defense. I don't see a world in which Kansas City doesn't go to the Super Bowl. So I'm going to say Kansas City 31, Tennessee 17.
Okay, so you got the Chiefs. I'm going to preface this by saying I'm 3-5 in the playoffs so far, so whatever I say, just take with a grain of salt. Doesn't really matter. But I am going to say Tennessee, and here's the reason why. The two things that I look here, and this is something I've learned as a Giants fan, right? I have seen 2 Super Bowls. They're aging at this point, but I have seen them. And my thought process on this is that the way you stop a maniac like Pat Mahomes or, say, Tom Brady in his prime with Randy Moss as a receiver is keeping them off the field, and Tennessee. So my thought process is one thing that Tennessee can execute is they can keep Pat Mahomes, like you said, limited possessions. He can only score so many times if he only has the ball so many times. And the other thing is that I have no doubt in my mind Mike Vrabel can outcoach Andy Reid in a close game in a big spot. This is the one spot where Andy Reid is completely untrustworthy, and Mike Vrabel so far has just run laps around a Hall of Fame head coach and probably 2 Hall of Fame head coaches, actually. So it's the 2 big.
Yeah. Well, I think you take a look at it and you look at the matchups, you definitely have to understand that what Mike Vrabel can do against Andy Reid is try to limit the amount that the possessions. That's what Mike Vrabel has to go into this game looking at and approaching. It's like, I'm only going to give you these amount of possessions per game, but still, Kansas City's so good they can score on all 8 of those possessions.
That's true. So, yeah, I'm not counting the Chiefs out by any means, and personally, I'm rooting for them. I think it'd be a better Super Bowl product if they're in it. But I'm going to go ahead and say Tennessee 27, Kansas City 24, which leads us to our final game, which is Niners Packers. And of course, you have a lot on the line here choosing this game, and I will be right there with you. I actually did pick, I wasn't publicized, I did pick Minnesota to win last week. I thought they'd win 24-21. They didn't. And I have also, by the way, picked against the Niners all year long for the exact same narrative that I think Jimmy G is going to have a big turnover in a big spot, and it just hasn't happened yet. But there's still time for that. But before you make this pick, let's consider one thing. I'm going to try and make this as loud as possible so you can hear it. Were you able to hear that?
Vaguely.
Okay. That was Henry and his son wearing Niners jerseys laughing at you.
Yes, it was.
Because you picked the Vikings last week. Henry actually predicted a 27-point win. They won by 17, so he wasn't that far off. So you've got a lot of risk here. What is your pick for Niners versus Packers?
I think the Packers are not going to be able to do enough. The first matchup was 37-8, San Francisco. I don't think it's going to be that bad, but San Francisco can do so many things defensively that can make it hard. And by the Packers offense is just a lot of, when they're in rhythm, they are really, 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 really good. When they're out of rhythm, they are really, really, really bad. And while they have Devontae Adams, they have a lot of question marks to go along with Devontae Adams. And Aaron Jones is going to have to have a huge game. I think the 49ers are going to be able to put their ears back, per se, and get after them. And I think it's going to be 49ers 34, Packers 21.
Yeah. Okay, good. See, yeah, you've learned your lesson.
Yeah, I can't do it in this game. It hurts. See, I'm at a crossroads here because I hate the Packers and I hate the 49ers, but I hate the 49ers because of Henry. So I have to go with my gut here and say, okay, it's time to pick the 49ers. They've been burning me all year.
Yeah, this is our revenge on Henry because I agree with you, and I have not picked the Niners for any bet. I picked them to lose both times to the Seahawks. I picked them to lose last week, but this week I don't like this matchup for Green Bay because, first of all, the Niners, it's like your doppelganger, right? Like the Niners can run the ball, they can control the clock too. They don't have Aaron Rodgers in their backfield, but they have a freaking pass rush that could definitely control Aaron Rodgers. And they have, Packers secondary isn't so great that it can just, that I think the Niners receivers have a shot, but really it's that Niners pass rush on Aaron Rodgers, I think, can neutralize him. And if you neutralize him and take out Devontae Adams, Packers don't have a lot to offer. They don't have these second and third receivers who are just going to dominate games either. And the Niners have Kittle who can. So I don't like the matchup. And I agree with you. I'm going to say Niners 28, Packers 20.
Yeah. Well, and the thing to keep in mind too, what really hurt the 49ers in a lot of these games are mobile quarterbacks. Like when as a pass rusher, you're going full go, and it's hard to stop on a dime because you're just going. And when you have a quarterback that can escape the pressure, and maybe Aaron Rodgers 8 years ago, 5 years ago, I would feel pretty confident in picking the Packers. But this is a 36, 37-year-old Aaron Rodgers. He looks banged up. Every game he gets tackled, it looks like his ankle's broken or his knee's falling off his body. But I can't see Rodgers escaping that pass rush. And I think, another bold prediction, I think Aaron Rodgers gets knocked out of this game.
Wow, that is bold. Yeah, for the record, for entertainment purposes, I am rooting for Packers Chiefs. I just happen to pick against both of them. And Niners Titans would just be such an awful Super Bowl. Entertainment. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But all right. So I mean, those are your official picks. Matt has Chiefs and Niners. I have Titans and Niners. How about you just score real quick because we're out of time here. National championship game tonight, Clemson LSU. Who do you have? And what score?
I got Clemson 48, LSU 47.
I'm gonna go LSU. I'm rooting for Clemson again. This goes with the theme. I'm choosing the team I'm rooting against. I think LSU is gonna win. They just have too much going on that in their favor. I'll say I do think it'll be high scoring though. I'll say 37-27 LSU. So yeah, there you have it. This has been Deep Thirds. Join us next week. Matt, we've got a show, probably a Super Bowl preview, right? In a couple of weeks, maybe a panel thing where I'll have people in and out.
Yep, we're going to have multiple guests. There will be more details coming out for that on close to Super Bowl weekend. We will have a show next week previewing a very special topic near and dear to my heart, the XFL.
Oh, good. All right. So special show next week. Time's pending. Super Bowl show we're probably looking at the Saturday, the day before. We'll see how that shakes out. The next show in your programming in general, you do not want to miss this, is myself and Henry tomorrow. Dong City, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. Do not miss it. We will be talking about the suspensions and the punishment for the Astros. And we have a lot to say about it, and I definitely encourage you to include yourselves in the comment section there. We'll try and argue with you for about an hour or so. Dong City tomorrow, 6:30. This has been Deep Thirds Podcast. Randy and Carl, hopefully back next time. That's Matt Bushnell. Have a good night.